Did you hear the one about Poltergeist? Some stories don't scare people when they happen. They become unsettling later, when people stop looking forward and start looking back. The bizarre stories surrounding the infamous horror film Poltergeist didn't begin as a curse. It began as a series of unrelated, awful facts. Facts that only felt connected after time had passed. Tonight, we're not trying to prove anything. We're only laying out what is documented, what is remembered, and why so many people still hesitate when this film series comes up. This drive is dedicated to those connected to the Poltergeist cinematic universe and are no longer with us. Sit back in the passenger seat, make sure you're buckled in. Let's talk about the dark side of Hollywood curses. Poltergeist was released in 1982. There is a discourse among the fans about who really directed the film, Tobe Hooper or Spielberg, who was a writer and producer. For me, it's unfair to Tobe, and while it's his most polished and, yes, Spielbergian film, I do still consider it his film. It arrived at a turning point in Hollywood where practical effects were being pushed further and realism mattered more than comfort. Several cast and crew members later described the set as serious and tightly run. In my opinion, they should be tightly run, but if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. JoBeth Williams, the lead of the film who plays the mom, would later say in interviews that the production felt professional, but unusually intense for a family-centered film. At the time, this meant nothing. No one suspected the film would carry any kind of reputation at all. But we should really talk about the skeletons, however. Maybe this is where all the bad mojo begins. One production choice is now undisputed, as disgusting as it will sound. During the infamous pool scene, where JoBeth Williams is in an unfinished pool with corpses, the production decided to use real human skeletons. That's right, actual human remains. This has been confirmed in multiple interviews and acknowledged publicly by JoBeth Williams. Years later, she stated that she learned this after filming the scene and that she was thoroughly disturbed by the decision. I would imagine she went to a doctor and got herself checked. You don't usually swim with corpses and consider yourself A-OK after. At the time, using real skeletons was not unheard of, believe it or not. They were surprisingly cheaper than replicas, and often sourced through medical suppliers. Now, nothing supernatural happened on set that day, but this fact became important later, because it introduced the idea that something authentic had been brought into the story without full awareness or consent. Like many large productions, Poltergeist experienced accidents. Lighting rigs fell, mechanical effects malfunctioned, schedules were disrupted. You're trying to control the world while making a film, and it is not easy whatsoever. None of these incidents were officially described as paranormal. No production reports suggested otherwise, and why would they? But some crew members later noted that there seemed to be more incidents than the usual, especially involving physical safety. Now, of course, this observation is retrospective, anecdotal. At the time, they were treated as the normal risks of practical effects filmmaking, but hindsight is 2020. Now here's where things take a turn into the tragic. Later in 1982, shortly after the film's release, actress Dominique Dunne, who played Dana and was destined for stardom, was tragically taken from this world when she was killed by her former boyfriend. Now, her death was not connected to the film or its production in any factual way, but the timing mattered. The movie was still in theaters, interviews were still airing, it was still a part of the public consciousness, and now the film was touched by the all-too-real and devastating death of a young woman. Several cast members later said this was the moment that they began associating the film with something heavier than fiction, not because of causation, but because of proximity. The so-called curse was rearing its ugly head. Things only get worse in the sequels, I'm afraid to say. By the time Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, entered production, the conversation around the films had changed. Actor Julian Beck, who played the incredibly creepy Kane, was already seriously ill during filming. His physical appearance in the film was largely the result of his illness, not makeup. Some would argue he probably shouldn't have done the film, but then again, he left a lasting impression in what would be his final performance. Beck unfortunately died in 1985 from complications related to cancer. Cast and crew later acknowledged that filming scenes with him carried an emotional weight, not fear, but awareness. There is an etherealness to his acting, as if he was already walking between the worlds himself. You could even say he was born to play the role. I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss Will Sampson, who also appeared in Poltergeist 2 as Taylor, the Native American helping the family. Sampson was open about his spiritual beliefs. Multiple sources report that he performed a spiritual blessing or cleansing on set, perhaps holding at bay whatever was eating away at the production for the time being. The film was released in 1986, but a short time later, Sampson would die in 1987 from complications related to a heart and lung transplant. A heavy double whammy. Again, tragic, real, and medically explained, but what if he had been tainted? I'm speculating, of course. Only later was it all folded into the broader narrative of the Poltergeist curse. Poltergeist 3, the final installment, went into production in 1988, resettling things in a high-rise building and only bringing back Carol Ann. But that would seal this trilogy's fate for the record books, and the franchise would face a loss that would seal the story for good. In 1988, young Carol Ann, actress Heather O'Rourke, the face of the franchise, died suddenly at the age of 12. Her death was caused by an undiagnosed medical condition. Seems she was initially treated for Crohn's disease, but actually suffered from intestinal stenosis, and it happened right in the middle of filming the movie. Tom Skerritt, who acted alongside O'Rourke in her final film, served as a pallbearer at the funeral. Director Gary Sherman was so distressed by her death that he didn't want to finish the movie, but they ultimately did, using a body double. When asked about O'Rourke's loss, Jo Beth Williams, who played her mom, said it was just staggering, and she called O'Rourke an incredible actress and an incredible little girl. Oliver Robbins, who played Robbie, her brother, was quoted as saying, "It was such a horrible tragedy. It was kind of a turning point in my life where it made me wake up to the reality that life is finite." After this, discussion changed. Industry jokes about curses stopped. Interviews became cautious, tiptoeing. People stopped saying coincidence aloud, not because they rejected it, but because they didn't know what else to say. No one involved in Poltergeist has ever officially claimed that the film was cursed. What exists instead is something quieter. A list of real deaths, a controversial production choice, a cluster of tragedies within a short time span. Human beings connect patterns. That's what we do, especially when stories involve death, homes, unseen forces, and things crossing boundaries. Especially when you're making a piece of art that shines a light on the other side. They say, if you stare into the abyss stares back at you. So what do we do with stories like this, events that aren't just private griefs, but worldwide hurts? We can explain every event, we can verify every cause, and still feel unsettled by how closely they seem to sit together, as if drawn together by something. If you're driving tonight and you pass a house that feels like it's holding a secret history, well, you're 100% right. Every house has a story to tell, cursed or not. But remember, sometimes the unease isn't about what happened. It's about how long people remember it. I should mention, Poltergeist is my favorite haunted house movie. And I try to watch it at least once a year. What's your favorite haunted house movie? Why don't you tell me about it as we drive down the road?